Hello everyone, and welcome back to the DO-254 Basics series, otherwise known as Everything You Wanted to Know About DO-254 But Were Afraid to Ask. This is part 2 with advice on navigating the DO-254 document. My name is Michelle Lang, and I'm going to be presenting this video to you today. In the first episode, we talked about the DO-254 document itself, pointing out some important aspects of it, and recognizing that it was a little bit tricky to understand. Part of the reason for that is that the document itself is not the easiest document to understand. When I first read it, I naively thought I could pick it up and sort of read it from cover to cover and get it and understand what DO-254 was and what I'm going to have to do as an applicant. But turns out that it's not quite as easy as that. You don't just pick it up, read it to end to end, and expect to understand what you need to do. In order to understand what you need to do, it really helps to understand the layout of the document and then read the document with that layout in mind. The next few slides I'm going to talk about how I'd suggest to do that. So basically start with the table of contents, and that seems kind of obvious. But actually, the table of contents of DO-254 is 4 pages long. It gets pretty detailed. You can at least scan through it to see the content and the flow of the content in the scope of DO-254. So I would start there, scan through the table of contents. Then there's actually 2 graphics I think that are really important in DO-254, probably more than 2, but in terms of understanding the document. The first one is figure 1.1, which is shown here. In the black outlined box, that is really the bounds of what's contained within DO-254. And what figure 1.1 then shows is how the DO-254 document content interacts with the broader systems development and certification environment. So that's kind of a good, a good way to place the document in its larger scope in the whole aircraft development process. Next graphic that's important, and it's probably my favorite one from DO-254, is figure 5.1, which depicts the hardware design lifecycle. And what this figure does is really it visually depicts your development flow, the flow you're going to go through as you're complying with DO-254. It shows the interactions between each of the various stages in that development flow, how planning interacts with both the hardware design processes and the supporting processes, and how data is exchanged, at least at a very high level, and then maps each of those steps to the section where you can get more information within DO-254. Another important aspect of learning when you're first reading the document is understanding the terminology. Sometimes knowing the terminology is half the battle. Anytime you step into a new domain, you're going to be flooded with new terms and things that make you feel uncomfortable and unfamiliar. And actually, Appendix C of DO-254 has a pretty good glossary of terms. So I'd advise at least scanning through that. You don't need to commit everything to memory, but at least scan through to see what sorts of terms you're likely to encounter as you read the document. And then as you're reading the document later, when you see a word over and over and recognize it probably has some special meaning that you don't fully grasp, then it might be good to go back to the glossary of terms and read the definition so that you really understand it in the context in which it's used. But anyways, it's a good glossary of terms. I highly recommend that you recognize that it's there and read it. And another, and probably the most critical piece of DO-254 that you have to understand, because it really has a huge bearing on what you do, is Appendix A. So Appendix A shows which objectives of DO-254 are pertinent for which design assurance levels. In other words, it modulates the DO-254 effort based on the DAO. And it does this in a really compressed table format that can be kind of difficult to grasp at first, but once you get it, you kind of get it. And it does convey a lot of important information in a really small space. So what it does is it looks at the objectives that need to be met for each design assurance level, what data that corresponds to, so what data needs to be captured and submitted, and then which sections of the document to find more information on the data and which objectives are actually being met and where those are in the document. So a lot of information in one small table and very important information at that. So Appendix A, really important. Bookmark that. And then there's Appendix B. So if you have a design assurance level A or B device, you have even more DO-254 compliance to worry about, and that's what's discussed in Appendix B. So Appendix B discusses additional methods to provide added assurance for DAL A and B designs, and in the introduction of this section, it basically describes the philosophy for this. It says, as the design assurance level increases, the approach needed to verify that a given design meets its safety requirements may need overlapping, layered combinations of design assurance methods. And don't let the word may there fool you. Basically, it will require overlapping, layered combinations of design assurance methods. Now, you can read through this section and attempt to understand it, but from my experience at least, this is one of those areas where you just want to talk to somebody with experience to understand what you need to do. Again, there's kind of a lot of philosophical or sort of theoretical things presented in this section, but there's very practical applications of what need to be done that is probably best learned from a consultant or an experienced member of your team. And finally, Section 11 is kind of the miscellaneous section, additional considerations. It addresses common aspects of your design and the development environment, things that are, that you need to deal with, such as what if you already have a design, it's previously developed hardware, it didn't comply with DO-254 and now you want to use it on a new program. What do you do? Or maybe it did comply with DO-254, but now you're modifying it, or maybe the design assurance level of this new system has changed. What do you do? Another topic is commercial off-the-shelf components. So if your design is using COTS, how do you deal with that? Another topic is product service experience as potentially a way to demonstrate design assurance. So if you have a device that's been in service for a long time, you want to reuse it in a new system, what do you need to show? And finally, tools. So the software tools used in the development of your hardware, can potentially introduce some risk or, potential errors in the process. So how do you deal with that? It's through a process called tool assessment and qualification. So all of that is discussed in Section 11, and it's good to have an understanding of that before you start your DO-254 program. So that was a quick overview of my advice on how to kind of understand the important parts of the document before you begin reading it end to end. So the next steps are definitely read the document, but kind of, refer back to this, use this advice to guide you, to help you understand the layout and the pertinence of each of the sections. Watch the remaining videos in the DO-254 Basic Series and other related videos on this channel. And again, the training that we're providing here, or the videos we're providing here, are just very basic level and shouldn't take the place of an official DO-254 training class. For more information, you can also visit logiscircuit.com, where you can download the DO-254 Basics white paper from our resources area. That's the technical paper that these videos were derived from. If you have any questions, you can email me, Michelle_Lang at logiscircuit.com. Thanks a lot for tuning in.